Welcome to the Sacred Sexuality Project. My name is Mark Weppett and I'm here to help you live a higher expression of your sexuality. And today we're going to be continuing our discussion of sexual transmutation and how it works. But first I want to apologize for not putting out a video last week. I was really busy with the launch of my new e-course on quitting porn called the Reboot Camp, and I'm putting it out with the NoFap Academy. So if you like my material on quitting porn and you want to see my systematic, comprehensive approach, make sure you check out the Reboot Camp in the link below. But anyway, back to our topic. Sexual transmutation is all about motivation. And motivation is the key, right? If you don't have motivation to be the person that you want to be, well, it's going to be very hard to get yourself to actually be that person, right? So sexual transmutation can help you get that. So from my experience, there are two main kinds of motivation. And what I like to call them is vertical and horizontal motivation. Horizontal motivation is basically the motivation of pain and pleasure, okay? And vertical motivation is the motivation of what you could call love. There's some big differences between these two kinds of motivation, but the main takeaway is that the more you operate from that vertical kind of motivation, the more you can be like your ideal self and move through any discomfort in your way. But the more horizontally you operate, the more you are kind of like a slave to pain and pleasure and kind of get trapped in what I call the prison of comfort. The thing is, the best way, I believe, to shift into that vertical mode of operation is through sexual transmutation. It's kind of like sexual transmutation is a path that you can follow to learn how to tap into this other form of motivation. Alright, so let's start breaking this down. First, let's look at the horizontal plane of pain and pleasure and how that kind of works. Alright, so it's pretty basic. It's what a lot of people call the lizard brain. Alright, and it's just like we're this heat-seeking missile that bounces around away from pain and toward pleasure. The name of the game here is self-gratification and self-preservation. And this is the way that I would say probably most people, and animals for that matter, tend to operate the majority of the time. So an example would be, you eat that piece of cake because it tastes good, right? It gives you pleasure. And you're not going to eat those Brussels sprouts because they don't taste good. They might even think they taste nasty, so you're going to stay away from them. That's what happens if you're operating purely on this horizontal plane. So while this pain and pleasure kind of motivation can provide a lot of incentive when you imagine that you're going to get a lot of pleasure, it's a big problem if this is your primary form of motivation, because really when you're confronted with discomfort, it doesn't really help you at all. And this really stinks because a lot of the best stuff in life is on the other side of some significant discomfort. In order to get yourself to face discomfort, you need to begin tapping into the vertical plane, okay? And the vertical plane, the question isn't, is this painful or pleasurable? The question is this loving according to the ideal that I've chosen? You do not act here because it feels good. You act here because it aligns with the point that you have set your sights on. From a fully, purely vertical plane, you're going to eat healthy because you believe health is good, But if you're eating healthy because you think that'll overall give you more pleasure, well, that's still some vertical because you're going to have to face self-denial sometimes. But it's also somewhat horizontal because you're still thinking about maximizing your pleasure. So these two planes can blend, but it's useful to look at the extremes. So the extreme here on the vertical plane is that you're doing something because you believe it is simply good. So from this fully vertical place of just looking at things whether they're good or they're bad, according to what you've aligned yourself to, pain and pleasure kind of take a different role. They are really viewed then as either inconsequential or simply adding kind of dramatic value. It's that pain and that pleasure that comes from pursuing goodness. That's just, it adds depth to your story, meaning to things. But it's not the overriding principle that you concern yourself with. So it's kind of like there's a level of detachment there. However, if you get caught up in the drama, then at that point that means you're really starting to concern yourself again with that pain and that pleasure, and that means that you've fallen back into a more horizontal mode of operation. So really, the more vertically you operate, the less you are controlled by pain and pleasure. And the less you're controlled by pain and pleasure, the more you can simply do what you think is best for you. So how do we get ourselves to make this transition? If you're thinking, oh man, I function primarily on this horizontal plane and I'm feeling trapped, how do I get out? Well, like I said, the key is sexual transmutation. The basic premise is that you shift from making love on a horizontal plane to making love on a vertical plane. And let's break this down. On the horizontal plane, sex is about pleasure and orgasm, okay? You pursue a lover to the extent to which they bring you pleasure or have the promise of bringing you pleasure. If they stop bringing you pleasure, well, hey, you're done, You walk away and you go to find a new partner, in a sense, right? Or you try to find a way to shift the relationship so that it can get that pleasure back. And from this mentality, offspring, is something that is either an afterthought or it's something that is outright usually avoided. However, on the vertical plane, sex isn't about orgasm or pleasure, it's about union and fertility. So from this vertical plane, you love someone so much that you literally want to become one with them, unite with them, and then to nurture the fruit of that union, aka the offspring. So in simple language, vertical love is about sharing a life together and raising a family. At some point you need to decide what kind of relationship do you want. Do you want that horizontal pleasure-seeking one, or do you want that vertical one about building a family and growing together and sharing a life? Because if you keep that pleasure-seeking mentality, you're not going to be able to make it through the tough times that actually allow you to raise that family and share that life. Now, here's where stuff gets interesting, because the principles of sexuality in terms of the vertical and horizontal planes also applies to other things. You can look at every behavior or attachment in your life as a lover, okay? And if you find yourself trapped and stuck and unable to be the person that you want to be, then it's likely that you are in a lot of horizontal relationships, okay? So as an example, all right, that piece of cake, you can enter into a relationship with it, right? Do you want to be unified with that piece of cake? Do you want to produce offspring with that piece of cake? No, not really. You just want the pleasure that it's going to bring you, right? So that's primarily horizontal. But the thing is, you are unifying with it and it is producing an offspring. And that offspring usually is a few extra pounds if it's done enough, and even if you take it even further, then it might include some health complications, right? So what you need to do is you need to start shifting into uniting yourself with vertical ideals and making love to those ideals, unifying with them and producing the kinds of offspring that you really want. So for example, maybe you're going to unite yourself with the ideal of moderation so that you can maintain your health but also enjoy things, enjoy indulgence in a way that doesn't disrupt your health. Or maybe you want to unite and make love with the concept of discipline so that you can make sustainable changes in your life and maintain strength. It's through finding these higher lovers that aren't about pain and pleasure, that are about goodness and finding what is best and what is most nourishing in your life, and learning how to unify yourself with them. One of the most practical and effective ways to making this shift is through making changes in your sexual activity, because your sexual activity is innately tied to this dynamic within you, okay? So like by learning how to cut out horizontal sexual interaction, then that forces you then to learn how to hold that charge. Instead of shooting it out in every direction horizontally whenever it seems pleasurable, you hold that charge, and as that charge builds, it's likely going to be uncomfortable. But if you can hold it and redirect it upward, then you're going to find a way of moving, a way of acting, a way of thinking, a way of motivating yourself that it feels altogether different than that pleasure-seeking mentality. And ultimately you find that it's much more powerful as well. However, that takes commitment and cultivation. And I will be covering how to do that, the mechanics of that, in much greater detail in future videos. So, remember to check out the Reboot Camp from the link below if you're interested in having me help you quit porn. But other than that, hope you all stay clean.